mea whātulou atu ki a haatakirotu mo haawhaiwhekau, te whātulou atu mo haapoto, haapunake mo haataukei, kai a tā ma o kai whainga Māorieni ke whakahoko ai tau pōtala noa he whiawhini, tuku atu ha whakatapu makehe ki he tau whakawhi whakalangilangi he whiawhini, toke tāri kawa, malo e tuku whainga Māori, me tuku taimi mai ki ke kau mai ki he tau whewahewhe aki whiawhini, o whapeke hoko ni ko ha tau potala noa aonga ki he tō tahako tō pei o iheni. Malo mo lava mai, tuku atu ka Pauline kene hoko atu. Malo apito.
Malo Alisi.
Malo Siato kainga ofena ko hoku hingoa ko Paulina Fonua. I'm going to introduce a little bit about Ofa Ki Tonga. This virtual space started back in May 2020 as an invitation to all with the desire to learn the Tongan language and culture. We meet weekly over a Tongan lesoni, then continue to bo talanoa about other related topics. In February 2021, Honorable Federica Tuita was invited as a guest speaker and conveyed to us that her mother, Her Royal Highness, Princess Bilulevu herself, wanted to gift the group the name of Ofa Ki Tonga for us in the diaspora to remember the love for our motherland. And so that's how Ofa Ki Tonga came to be. I'm going to turn the time over to Lulika.
Hello, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'll just be going over some housekeeping rules of engagement in this space. Our rules of engagement are aligned with our Tongan core values and how we choose to define them in this space. So, which are whakapa'apa, which is acknowledging and returning respect, hanga whakatokilalo or lototo, humility and open to learning, tauhiwaha'a or tauhiwa, keeping the relationship ongoing, alive and well, mamahi'imea, loyalty and passion. So just to break down quickly, briefly, whakapa'apa, we want to be respectful of everyone's learning journey, and that's acknowledging that we're all coming in, learning the language, reconnecting with our culture at different backgrounds, and we want to be respectful as well of everyone's backgrounds. We also want to make clear that in this space, we stand with our Leiti and queer community. We have zero tolerance for homophobic, anti-queer slurs or rhetoric. We also stand with our Kainga Liuli community, our Black community, as far as we have zero tolerance for anti-Blackness. We don't use the N-word or misuse or appropriate African-American vernacular English here, or other Tongan derogatory terms or rhetoric. We also, so moving on to whakatokilalo or lototo, we hope to encourage folks to be open to learning other perspectives and experiences that are different from your own. Just reminding folks to be humble and take accountability when, if you're called out for causing harm unto others in this space. So these rules of engagement, if they are, if you don't follow them, we hope to, make sure that we do the right things to make things right. Sit and lean into the discomfort of being called out of if you are causing harm to others, to admitting that you have caused harm, and just remembering that impact is more important than intentions. As far as tauhiwa, we hope to encourage folks to pass the mic, make space for others to speak. Also encouraging folks to check in on each other, reaching out and offering ways to help or ways to amend any harm that you have caused, and accept the consequences when you aren't following these rules of engagement. And that is possible suspension from the group until actions to making amends are made. And lastly, mamahi'imea, we want to encourage folks to try to attend our weekly meetings as much as you possibly can. We hope folks are being proactive in the roles that you take in this space. Also encouraging to bring good energy to the space, share what you've learned, and invite other fellow Tongans with similar interests or desires to learn. Also encouraging folks to be a better ally to those most marginalized in our communities, and also to speak up when something doesn't feel right. Going up there, I'm going to now turn the time back to Paulina.
Mahalo, Lilika, for going over those rules of engagement. We do have resources. If you have any questions about some of the things that were mentioned, feel free to let us know. Without further ado, I'm just going to turn to Lisiate, who will introduce our guests.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Lilika. Thank you, Alisi. That was just a little example of how we do things. You know, it's a collective effort, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with. We just kind of fill in where we need to, you know, and we go together, you know. So yeah, so man, how do I introduce Dr. Kava? I could go on for days singing Dr. Kava's praises, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I was going to give you a brief intro. I first was introduced to Dr. Leora Kava at a Mauna Kea organizing meeting here in Hunters Point, and we had a breakout session, and I chose the politics one, and that was the group that Lee was doing. And she talked about Queen Liliuokalani and the illegal overthrow of, you know, the Kingdom of Hawaii. And to me, that was the beginning of the path I'm on now, as far as like my interest in politics, in unearthing my roots. You know, Lee is one of those most North Stars in my journey, and I can't thank the ancestors enough for crossing our paths. You know, so before I start crying on camera, I'll just go ahead and give it to Dr. Kava. So without further ado, Kava, the floor is yours.
Lisiate, thank you so much. I'm kind of speechless after that kind of introduction. And also I'm like, oh, how am I gonna live up to being a star? Oh gosh. I also want to say thank you so much, Famalo to the organizers of this space. I haven't been able to participate as much as I wanted to because of scraping through teaching at SFSU, but I'm making sure that after this semester, I'm making sure that these Thursday nights are free so I can finally join this space. Thank you for making this space possible and for changing definitions of Tongan space. And I also wanted to say thank you to everyone who's here. I deeply apologize for being late. I was sitting on the wrong Zoom link for far too long. And I was like, oh, I'm not late. Girl, you're late. You're late. Get over to the other Zoom. So thank you so much for your patience. I come to this space with a lot of humility because I am still learning my Tongan language, and I hope my explanation and my talk today give a little bit of insight into my journey and my strange journey through accessing Tongan language and how I've turned it into a poetic journey and writing poetry. And I also have some exercises that I'd love for us all to do together. So I'm going to see if I can share. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a story for a couple minutes. And please let me know. I just want to, for accessibility, I just want to make sure that folks are able to see the screen. Right now, there's just water on the screen. Right now, is everybody able to see this so far? All right, excellent. The story I'm going to do, how I designed my talk was first to give a bit of a language genealogy and my journey toward Tongan language. And the next piece, please also let me know if you're not able to see these. I'm happy to put things in the chat as well. The second part of what I'm going to do is just share a couple of poems, just some of them, and explain the method and the reason why I wrote them. And then I want to hear your poems. So I have a couple of exercises that I've designed, and I have some resources that I'd love us to play with so we can play with Tongan language. specifically, I'm going to give us a dictionary entry and we're going to mess around with that. And all those skills, it's like games, it's like magic tricks. I'm just going to teach you a few things and then you can carry them on into your own practice as well. So I'll start with a language genealogy. And as you can see on the screen, I want to kind of use the visual and consider our histories of visual literacy as Pacific people, and think about the way that I've designed these slides is to kind of show that my journey toward Tongan language has been like throwing paper on water and trying to figure out how to put these pieces together. So this is how I've designed the slides, to kind of show that nonlinear, piece by piece, things get smeared and smudged and some things float away. Some pieces of the story float away and then sometimes they come back, sometimes they're lost. So this is kind of how that story toward Tongan language is for me, is pieces of paper on water. So I'll go first with the genealogy. I'm just going to go in a little bit of a spiral in this story and explain a little bit of why I write what I write in poetry, how I've come to be an assistant professor at San Francisco State teaching Pacific Islander literatures, and also how that is deeply tied to my understanding of sound and my understanding of language. So here we go. First part of this is just starting with my roots with words and sounds, mothers and teachers. My mother was very, very precise. My mother was Balangi, my father is Tongan. And so I was raised by my mother, and I was raised in a household that was really insistent on explaining your words. If you did something, you needed to explain why you did it, and you needed to explain it well. This may have been because my mother was training for her Juris Doctorate, wanting to become a lawyer. So every single part of my speech from a young age when I was learning to talk was, there was a lot of precision that was asked of me from a young age. And that also kind of ties into the insistence. My mother was able to kind of scrape together enough money to give me piano lessons at a young age, starting at 5. And it was kind of, it was good training, but it was also the militant kind. It's like, this is the kind of training you're supposed to do. It's like, the goal is you become a concert pianist. That's the kind of pressure we're going to put on you at 5 years old, little one. So not only was there a focus on words and using your words and being really precise and thinking about your words as you're saying them, I was also taught to really respect and memorize sound from my piano teacher, Chunghwa Bryce, who still teaches piano in South Sacramento. So that's where I first started really focusing on language and sound, was at these young ages. And what this turns into is, you know, I'm focusing so much on English, and I'm focusing so much on a specific kind of music, which was quote unquote classically trained. And what does that mean? It means you learn Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, and then you graduate into French composers and then into Russian composers. But at no point had I actually learned to study anything in terms of Tongan language or Tongan music. And that's why the next piece of my genealogy comes from Tofa, which is an organization, community organization that was founded by my auntie, Ofa Catherine Mann, who passed away last year. She organized this place for young Tongan people to come and learn our language, which is the first time I ever saw the Shumway book, was in these spaces in South Sacramento, where we went to the community center and we got to read some of those lessons. And those were the first Tongan words that I learned. And we also learned Ta'orunga and different kind of faiva to perform for the Sacramento State Fair. So this is my introduction at around like 12, 13 into Tongan sound and Tongan language. And this kind of focus on the importance of language kind of led me to want to learn more languages. And also, strangely, I ended up as a high schooler, started learning Mandarin. And the reason that is because of my mother again. My mom was a single mom. She sang as part of the Sacramento choir. And they were going to go on tour to Beijing and this was back in like 2006. They were going to go on tour to Beijing for a month. And she said there was no way she was leaving me by myself. And so she was like, you're coming with me. And if you're going to go to another country, then you're going to learn the language. And so I was, again, kind of fostering that insistence on language and precision. She insisted that I start taking night classes as a 16-year-old, start taking night classes at Sac City to learn Mandarin. And that's when I started really falling in love with that language. And I continued that study into my undergrad. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in East Asian Studies with a focus on Chinese language and literature. And this was at a university in Providence, Rhode Island. There were no other Pacific Islanders there. And I was just kind of going through the motions of school. Like I went in these in the language department, specifically the Chinese language, Mandarin in particular. There were some of the best language teachers I've ever seen. There were some of the best teachers I've ever experienced. These were predominantly women who dedicated their lives to figuring out how to teach their native language to non-native speakers. So I remember distinctly being trained in learning Mandarin. We didn't learn our first words until we had passed the pronunciation tests first. And this is where they're teaching us, this is when you say this word, this is how low your jaw needs to be. This is where you need to feel your tongue touching your teeth. If it's not doing that, you're not pronouncing it. Like this is where you need to put your tongue at the back of your teeth, not at the top, but at the bottom, like such precision just on pronunciation before we got into basic ways of speaking. And this was also a time where in learning Mandarin as an undergrad student, I also was starting to learn about Chinese literature, specifically literature that changed the face of Chinese politics, starting in 1911, well, leading up to 1911, the revolution that ended dynastic China, and the literature that shaped and narrated that really tumultuous time in history. And so I started to learn about the power of storytelling. And in doing so, I started wondering, and all this focus on Chinese language and Chinese history, I started wondering where my stories were. Where is it? Where's the record of Pacific Islanders? Where's our expertise? Where's our stories? And especially being, raised Hafakasi, I wanted to see them. And so what that meant is that I did kind of a sharp 180, and instead of deciding to go to grad school to kind of hone my skills even more, I was thinking I was going to become a translator, and I don't know what I was going to do after that. I actually decided to go looking for and to find Pacific literature, Pacific thought at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, because I knew that there somewhere was a Center for Pacific Island Studies. And so that's where I went. And this is where I was then exposed to Tongan language classes, which really, with Amalia Pasi, shout out to the Pasi family, I miss them very much. Learning Tongan culture and Tongan cultural thought in that class, but also taking Hawaiian language classes, which is where I really truly saw the effects of Indigenous language. This is because of Indigenous revitalization movements throughout the Pacific, and starting in the 1950s, where Native Hawaiian Native Hawaiian activists, Maori activists all over the Pacific, actually, people are starting to reclaim their languages. Hawaiian had been outlawed as a language of instruction in Hawaii in 1896, and that history had to be reclaimed and overturned. Same with the ways that Maori language had been outlawed and suppressed, same with most of our Indigenous languages. So I went into Hawaiian language classes, learning from the next generation of Hawaiian scholars who are figuring out how to teach their language in their own Indigenous ways. So I learned about Indigenous grammar structures. I learned how true language, what it felt like to be taught a language and to learn it and to be able to speak it in those times. So this was really important to me to see, kind of combine that experience of seeing Mandarin language teachers use such precision, and then also seeing that precision being transformed and defined by Indigenous language scholars. So this was an amazing moment for me. At the same time, kind of going in a different direction, in order to kind of get through grad school, the thing about being a graduate student is if you want to graduate with no loans, which is almost impossible, one of the things that you can try and do is teach as a graduate student. Trying to get those things, they'll waive your tuition, but they will pay you nothing, and therefore trying to survive in Hawaii was a little bit hard without 2-3 other jobs. So one of my jobs, as I was starting out, was to be an SAT tutor. And this kind of gets into language, where I had to teach students, mostly students of color, and in Hawaii, most of my students were Asian, speaking Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, not actually a lot of Mandarin, but a lot of Cantonese at home. And they're trying to learn how to take these vocab tests, and trying to decipher these really esoteric, like really kind of out of nowhere old English words. And so how am I going to prepare these kids, for how am I going to prepare them to take this test? And one of the things that I found the most helpful was when they were learning these things, we actually really traced words back to their roots. Because when you trace words back to their roots, you find their original images, you find their stories, you find really gorgeous and poetic and sometimes scary, creepy, like different ways. Like if you go back into the Latin roots, the French roots, the German, you're able to tell a story about the word that helps you remember it. And you're able to see it in different iterations. You're able to see it shapeshift as it changes. It's not just about learning a word and that's it. You learn the story behind it. And what was amazing about that is that started, while I thought that this was just a way to survive and like teach and like get through grad school, that understanding of going back to the roots is actually became the defining factor for the poetry that I would write and that I would use to get my PhD, and that I hope to teach a little bit of today. So going back to the roots, I had to figure out, what am I going to write in grad school and why am I writing it? So that gets me into two things. I did my MA in Pacific Studies and I got my PhD in English with a focus on Pacific Islander literature. And I am very privileged to have been able to do that because of the work that people have done to create programs like that at UH Manoa and what we're trying to create out here. What I figured out that I needed to do was have a relationship with Tongan language that actually narrated my experience trying to piece these things together. So I decided there's a couple of things that went on in my training at grad school. Number one, I got trained by Indigenous Pacific Islanders on how to teach poetry in English. Not only was I trained to do that in the classroom, but I was trained to do that in the community through Pacific Tongues, which was an organization, community-based organization in Honolulu. It was an after-school program, and it really focused on Indigenous Pacific ways of getting kids to do slam poetry, which is oratory. So I learned that through my cohort members in grad school. And as an MA student, I went back to Tonga and wound up running poetry workshops. Like I asked to run them kind of on an off the cuff, kind of someone heard that I was able to do it. And they were like our general Tongan ways. It's like, oh, you got a skill? Oh, you're going to use it then. oh, and you're going to use it all the time. So I went from not knowing what I was doing when I went back to Tonga to do some MA work to fully having a job of figuring out how to teach slam poetry to young Tongan speakers. So that created the Pacific First Project, which I still run when I'm back in Tonga, and which I'm hoping to run while I'm here in the Bay Area. But that experience of teaching and learning how to write poetry and how to facilitate the space with which people can write poetry turned into my PhD. And then I needed to figure out what I was going to do and write for my PhD, which brings me to finding poetry and the concept of found poetry. I decided as I was learning in Tongan and I was taking Tongan language classes, I started to return back to those concepts of teaching SAT vocabulary words because I wanted to remember, like, I'm an English speaker. That's the language that I was born into. So how do I shift my mind? How do I remember all these new things that I'm learning in a culture and a language that is ancestrally mine, but I haven't been born into? So what happened is in Tongan language class, I started to pay attention to the roots behind the words that were coming up, and really starting to find beauty in the archive that we have in the multiple Tongan English dictionaries that we have. In particular, I remember sitting in class and I had just gotten back from Tonga and I got this really super thick one. It's my favorite. It's the Church Word Dictionary. It was originally published in the 1950s and it's super thick, and that's why I love it so much. And what I remember doing distinctly in the middle of a class, I was looking up the word whakamatala. I thought that word sounded so beautiful. Again, paying attention to sound. And I looked that word up and I thought, wow, because it was a new level of vocabulary for me after like okuo saipe, like te alu, oh, like I'm going to finally, there's this word was like, all right, this is a new kind of grammar I have to figure out. How do I say I'm going to explain something to you? And in looking at that word in the dictionary, I found the entries of where whakamatala comes from in terms of the prefix whaka, to be made in the nature of, to be in the manner of, and then matala, which means several things, which means to be clear in the mind, but it also means of flowers to bloom. And so this is something that I found was deeply poetic, and also something that kind of was like a secret into the mind of my ancestors. Kind of thinking about our ancestors figured out how to explain the feeling of understanding by looking at the blooming of flowers. When you watch a flower bloom, it opens up, it spreads out, and that becomes the analogy and the experience of what it feels like to understand something in your mind. I thought that was so genius, and I thought it was so beautiful that I decided to let our language teach me poetry. And so I combine this with a really cool technique that I'm going to teach to you in a minute called found poetry. It's a method of taking a text, say like the Tongan English Dictionary, lifting the language from that dictionary based on your own understanding of mafana, like looking for the poetic language, looking for those images, and then creating your own poetry out of it. And in doing so, you are navigating your own language and making connections between words that help you remember vocabulary, but also remember how to put it together. And so this was something that was really important for me. And I then finished my dissertation entitled Matala. And it is an exploration of those workings with the dictionary, flowing between different words, and also paying attention to how in Tongan, while this dictionary is arranged in the quote unquote, it's a super long word, abecedarian. It's just a real fancy way of saying it's in the Roman alphabetical order, A, B, C, D. That is a constructed alphabet, right? It's kind of arbitrary. Why do we start with A? Well, that goes all the way back to Greek letters, Greco-Roman stylings and ordering of words. But in Tongan language, what's really amazing is it's not necessarily the order that you're looking at the synonyms at the ends of these dictionary entries. And I'm going to give you one so you'll be able to see it. What is so brilliant about this dictionary is that the translators here, and I don't think all of them are mentioned in this dictionary. Churchward kind of says, oh, this is who they are. He only mentions one of them. And I'm like, I think there were more people that helped you with this. What's amazing is that they are so generous and abundant with the amount of synonyms they give after each and every entry. And what that does is it gives you kind of like the secret garden pathways through our language. When you look at matala and then you look at the other words it's related to, you see all of these different kinds of connections, which are connected to ancestral chants, which are connected to place names, which are connected to like drama history that, you know, Tongans will remember and that we need to pass on. So this became a kind of obsession for me to follow meaning through the dictionary, and then also to treat the dictionary as an incomplete and sometimes unreliable document. There are words here that I've heard and asked people about, and I've looked it up and it's not there. Now, clearly this dictionary could use some updating, but it's also, you know, this is a colonial document. Putting things into dictionaries was meant to translate the totality of our indigenous languages to be easily understood in English. But as we all know, there are so many things in Tongan that aren't easily translatable, and we need more of that complexity, which is why found poetry is so great and why I'm so excited to kind of share with you and hear your own poems after I run you through some exercises, because our relationship to our words and the stories behind our words still live within us. And those are really, really important experiences to track and keep as an archive for our next generations who are going to be changing our language as they change. So thank you for listening to that rather long genealogy. I'm going to go on to this next thing. I'm going to share a couple of poems and kind of walk you through them. So some poems. First and foremost, I'm going to give a reading of Matala, which is that first poem. This is the first ever found poem that I created. And there are pieces of this poem that are directly lifted from the page with the word Matala on it. So there are pieces of the dictionary in this poem, and then there's pieces of my own words. So I arranged them in ways that are remixing the dictionary, if we could. So give me 1 second while I pull up this piece, which, funnily enough, I think I actually have over here. Sorry, everyone, give me 2 seconds while I find this. Okay. All right. Okay, I seem to have misplaced my poems, which is fine because I put them in multiple places. So give me 2 seconds, everyone. Okay, I'll read Matala. And then if you'd like, I can also put it in the chat too, so you can kind of see the way that I indicate on text. It's hard to kind of say, I don't quote the dictionary, but on the page itself, when you see it, and I can put it in the chat, anything that is, well, most of the things actually, because I play some tricks in here, most of the things that are italicized is language that is directly lifted from the dictionary. So I'll read it first and then I'll drop it in the chat. So this is Matala, Notes in the Margins of the Tongan English Dictionary. 1, a syllable. The spot where you first insert the spade when digging, as in the spot where you lift the soil of your language and turn it over. 2, speaking, the feel of dirt when one's skin is rubbed. Each each vowel newly made topicloth, overbright, flamboyant, each consonant, the curved curl of half coconut flesh, dried in the shell, left out in the sun. 3, understanding, the oil contained in coconut cream, as in lolomatala aupito, oil which will eventually come away freely. Consider the possibility of each new phrase. One sentence could be the night before the new moon becomes visible, habitually glancing, always on the alert. Another sentence could be one far from handsome, but which you've chosen to speak nevertheless. Say to each new word, as in you are still fresh in my memory, each sentence a bloom. 4, on difficult days, you will understand your people as if your eyes are only half open. On good days, you will consider the shape of flowers. Difficult to understand, easy to understand. 5, matala. Our language is shaped in the movement of growing things, as in when you understand what someone says to you in Tongan, you will reply, I bloom you. Thank you. I can drop that one in the chat in just 2 seconds, but I wanted to go on to a couple of other things because I just wanted to really emphasize the ways that it's important to play with your language as a way of learning it, both in English and in Tongan and our other languages. Hopefully when we are speaking our Tongan language, we then move on to Samoan, we move on to Hawaiian, so that we are speaking to each other across our and between our languages. But I wanted to just give another couple of examples of ways that you can play around with things, especially the multiple meanings of our Tongan words. So I'm going to read a piece called Thala. And this is something that I felt was really fun to play with, especially given the multiple, and I give a couple of the multiple definitions of Thala, which can also be linked to matala, but we'll go from here first. So here's how I was playing with this word, thala. As a verb, it means to tell, relate, to state, assert, tell, or command. As a noun, it can be a thorn, a prickle, a spike, barb, or bristle. So this is the poem that came out of combining those two, Thala. The movies I loved most as a kid always had a spike or barb in them. From Beauty and the Beast and Sleeping Beauty to The Secret of Nim, stories were thala talaia, abounding in thorns. A rose in the way of telling time. Briar and thicket, names for protection. The rose bush, a resistance movement. Clever and catching onto any unsuspecting pant leg, t-shirt collar, or soft palm. A story was the sharp thing to tell, relate, assert, command. What made me pay attention to my hands, how I would carry and give away each spike, barb, and bristle. So this is a really fun way to also play around with the multiple meanings that our words have, and that our words hold multiple meanings in the same space, depending on the context in which you use them, but you can also be playful and clever and mean multiple things at once, which our language was built and designed to do. I have 2 more, and then if it's okay, we can go into some exercises or some comments or questions. Just 2 more. I wanted to play with this word, anga, in terms of one of my deepest fears of being in the ocean is being around sharks. But obviously the anga that I'm posting here is actually, the prefix that we hear so much, anga lele, anga kovi. And so what I wanted to do with this is playing around across the dictionary not just on the same page, but playing around with what happens if I play around with this concept of habits, of anga, to be in the manner of, to be in the habit of, especially being in the good habits versus the bad habits. What happens when I combine that with the word anga, with the whakao'a in the front of it, which makes it the word for shark. So I was just playing around with these two together. What if anga and anga occupied the same space? So let me read that really quickly. It's a short one. Okay. So anga. Anga circles way back in the throat. Out of desire for good habit, custom, nature, we gargle this word in salt water and sing ah with carefully tilted jaws. Or else we might accidentally take on too much water, spitting into the sink and attacking the vowel instead. Suddenly, a fin appears, anga, as if we tapped on aquarium glass or ocean surface, calling something up from the deep. So I just wanted that a soft understanding of habit to turn into this image of the shark. And you can do whatever you want with poetry. You can make whatever magic tricks you want. So feel free to play around. And then I wanted to just give one last one, pronunciation. And this piece is something that was really hard to write, but I got it out. And it's something that I wanted to do in terms of something that I've seen Pacific poets do, particularly Hananike Trask. Hananike is, I just saw the word wizard in here. Wizard is good. When you read her poetry, she does this really amazing thing that requires that you understand Hawaiian pronunciation and also understand English pronunciation. What she does is she slips between them, where she will make words rhyme. The word in Hawaiian will either look like it rhymes like the next word in English, or they will actually rhyme together, or they'll be slightly off. For example, I'll put this in here. The end of one of her lines is the ko'olau, right? Referencing the ko'olau mountain range on Oahu. And then the next line, she'll put the word cool somewhere in that. So what she's doing is playing with the ways that you're reading these words in terms of cool. Also, if you're mispronouncing the Hawaiian, you think it rhymes, but it's this kind of like mind game that she's playing. It's like, is it supposed to rhyme? Is it not supposed to rhyme? So I wanted to try and do that with just one word, really thinking about the word malae, and thinking about caring for, when I go back to Tonga, I have the privilege of being able to take care of my great-grandmother's malae and also my great-grandfather's malae at Kava. So I wanted to think about how we can consider the meaning of malae an opening, an open space, and thinking about how we make open spaces in our body to pronounce our language. So I wanted to read this, and then we can play around with some words. Here we go. All right. So the title of this is Pronunciation. For now, we speak only in brooms, sweeping sand across the teeth of concrete slabs. We brush and repeat each stone syllable of the clearing where our great-grandparents are buried. Some words from memory are always here, sounded out by the ant feet, hefting sand grit and glitter homes, fan light over the blue tongues of plastic flowers. The weeds will try to cover all the other ways of saying history. But our pronunciation begins with the clearing we make in our bodies first, where the broom handle widens the O's in the mouth of our hands, how we shake open the throat to settle each pile of leaves before burning them. Trust the body to open in our language with the rhythm of weight. One hand pushing sand, the other pulling syllables. In one last sway as we close the gates of the Malae, so the trees can better hiss hush at the edge of the ancestor, speaking in all our names. Malo, koyate. Those are some of the poems that came out of playing with found poetry. I just wanted to do a time check and see how people feel. If you want to just do a little bit of talk story, or if you want to do a couple of found poetry exercises, or we could do both, depending on the time.
Mahalo, Ali. Thank you so much, Dr. Kava. You know, I'll just let everybody unmute, and then you could just figure it out together. What we either way, like Lilika says, you know, both. You know, we could talk story, we can have a Q&A. You know, we can do exercises. It's up to the group. You know, I'm down for either. I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Looks
it's
like yeah.
both. Okay. Do people want to do exercises first? Want to do exercises first? Okay. Let's play around with some words. Okay. So here's what we're going to do in the chat. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to just exit from here. I'm going to drop something in the chat. It is a PDF of a part of the Church Word Dictionary. It's the page of the dictionary that has the word fonua on it. So you can play around with this word today, and I'll guide you through how to play around with this. And then you can kind of take it where you need it. But that is available in the chat. And I can also display it as well a little bit later on. So here we go. We're going to do a couple of found poetry exercises. And first, I just wanted to start with a definition of what found poetry is. So found poetry, I'll also provide slides to this for folks. I'm drawing this from the definition. I think it's a really good, concise definition from the Academy of American Poets. Found poetry is a technique and a style, and it, this is the best way to explain it. So found poems take existing texts and refashion them, reorder them, and present them as poems. It's the literary equivalent of a collage. Found poetry is often made from newspaper articles, street signs, graffiti, speeches, letters, or even other poems. A pure found poem consists exclusively of outside texts, and this means that the words of the poem remained as they were found, with few additions or omissions. Decisions of form, such as where to break the line, are left to the poet. So we're going to go through a couple of rounds of how to play with found poetry. I'm giving you the found text. This is the only, when I first heard about this, is like found poetry is some like fancy thing. It literally means poetry that you found somewhere else, in terms of like, oh, look, there's this really beautiful image in a newspaper article. Poof, there's a text. And your definition of text can be literally anything. As they said, graffiti, t-shirts. So the found text that we're going to be working with and playing around with is that page of the dictionary that I just dropped in the chat. So just make sure that you're able to see it. If you can open it somewhere else, where I would highly recommend that if you can open it, you find a place where you can highlight it. If you're not able to work with the document, at least have something down, maybe use your phone or a piece of paper to have in front of you, so that you can put down. So the process that we're going to do is we're going to lift the language first, right? We're going to play with this found piece. So I guess in terms of materials, just make sure that you have access to looking at Fonua. You can open it in Adobe if you need to highlight it. If not, you can just look at it. you might need something else open, like a Word app or a physical piece of paper, right? So here we go. Okay. First thing that we're going to do on the left side of the screen is you'll see this. We're going to do a round called lifting the text. So what you're going to do is on that piece, fonua, right? I want you, nope, sorry. Oh my goodness, this is, I don't know what is it doing. What I'm going to have you do is you're going to look through this and you are going to circle, use that feeling of mafana. When you see something that either feels strange or is like, oh, that's beautiful, or like, what is that going on? Anything that you read on the page is open for you to lift. And let's just take a quick look at what I mean by that. So I'm going to stop sharing this and we're actually just going to look at the page itself. Okay. Let me share this. So in the Tongan English Dictionary, all right, we have all of this here. What I want you to do, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes. This is a really short exercise. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I want you to go through this, and I'm going to do this as if I'm going to highlight it, all right? Just so you can see what I mean by lifting text. All right, I'm looking through this. All I'm doing is just looking through and highlighting anything that stands out to me as either beautiful or strange or an interesting turn of phrase. So like going through this, you're going to have 3 minutes and I want you to just choose what comes up for you. For me right now, the flies came and swarmed. And then compare, matuku, something less than full. What else do I see in here? Beetle, very shiny. Land, country, territory. You know, just going through and highlighting things that really stand out to you, right? I'd want you to kind of, this is the kind of exercise going on right here. If it feels strange, it's like, oh, that's weird. Follow that instinct, go with it, right? Kind of let your creative sphere expand a little bit more to find words or find combinations that are interesting to you. I'm actually going to shorten this because I do want you to do this quite quickly. So I don't want you to think too hard about what's going on. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And what I want you to do is if you're highlighting it, that's fine. Or if you're reading it and you're writing it down, that can also be fine too. I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to write things down as you see them. Okay. Don't add any other words. Just write down these pieces. Does that make sense? We're good?
Tongan and English, yeah, we could, whatever's
Tongan
on the
and
page.
English, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Numbers?
Numbers. You
Okay.
can also play around with grammar if you want to. There's like,
Okay.
if you also want me, you know, feel free, like CP, if you want to ask me what that means, I can look it up in dictionary code and tell you what it means. It's shorthand for essentially compare to or synonym, right? So kind of seeing like, ooh, this is interesting, like fonu, look at all of the extra things that come with fonu. This is not what happens in English, right? You see all of these different things that you can go through, and these are the secret pathways through the dictionary, is following all of these CPs and all of the extra that's going on here. But for now, we're just sticking with one page. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I want you to lift the language that speaks to you the most. Pay attention to that mafana. Pay attention to what feels strange. Write it down as you see it on the page, and then we'll go into the next piece of this exercise. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this and I will share my instructions again, so it'll be there for your reference. And let's get started. So 2 minutes, lift language from that page, whatever stands out to you. Ready, go. Okay, so that was 2 minutes. I want you to just leave it as it is. What I'd really love to do is have maybe one person, if you could volunteer and just read through, as if you were reading a poem, read through what you lifted from that. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make grammatical sense. That's not really what we're looking for. What's really amazing about the human brain is that it is always looking for connection, no matter how seemingly different is going on. So what you can do is just listen to what someone picked out, all right? And listen for those connections, really kind of think about what emotions come up when you hear these seemingly disconnected pieces read together. It's interesting what will come up emotionally in any imagery that comes up. So can I have the volunteer just read through every single thing? You don't have to say, first I choose this, then I choose that. Just read it all the way through. Someone go first?
I can read mine.
That would be awesome.
Filled, full, land of plenty, land free from water or other calamity. Koto ai funua, has the afterbirth come away yet? The stone enclosure for the body, to have water in the lungs, to swallow up or overwhelm.
You're getting claps. Look at that. It's a full poem. So what I would like to do is kind of open up for folks to respond for Lilika's piece so far. What came up for you as you were listening? What grabbed you? Think about that mafana. What came up for you as you were listening to Lilika's piece? Try and identify a feeling.
I was thinking of when you said water in the lungs, like it made me ask myself, like, because after hearing what Dr.Kava was saying, you somehow connect to these words, and I'm wondering, like, what is making Lilika connect to this water in the? Do you have some water in your lungs? I only asked this because we're a family. So, anyways, sorry, Lilika. Nosy. That's me.
Yeah, brings out the curiosity. I was also thinking about how what you could do is also think about what would it mean if you titled your poem Fonua, right? What would it mean for you to define this poem in some way, shape, or form? You actually have the direct definition of Fonua in that piece, Lilika, right? But then you have all of these other almost like opposite images, also the images of women's bodies, holding things, letting them go, being encased. There's so many different kinds of, different spaces going on to see what happens if you would name this Fonua. Is there anybody else who wants to share before we go on to two very, very short other exercises, which you can expand on later, but anybody else want to read through? This is the what you just did was a pure found poem. Like you haven't added anything, you haven't shifted anything. This is purely found poetry. And Nick is saying that, moments of overwhelming feelings and experiences felt like a theme. Really cool to hear those found sections connected like that. See, the brain will do crazy things. Somebody else want to go?
Can I try?
Yes, please.
Whanua mahu, land of plenty. Whanua hao, land free from war or other calamity. Whanua, placenta. Koto ai whanua. Whanua for grave, huolava ai whanua. That's it.
That is stunning. I love you have such an amazing direction shift after you say whanua mahu, whanua hao, whanua placenta. Woo! Get the feels in there. That was stunning. So these amazing, something that was explained to me about this technique and about writing poetry and playing around with words is really you're looking for that moment of mafana, or you're looking for what my friend Rajiv says is that moment that shocks you back into your body. those words that are just like, oh, I felt that in my gut, or I felt that in my lungs, or like, oh, I feel a bit tingly. Like, really kind of thinking about the impact that you can make, just these small little decisions of what you lift and the way that your brain and your body are going to respond to those connections. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I love you're like, I think I can try. And I was like, you did it, the whole thing, the whole assignment. It was awesome. I have two more very, very short things to do. And you're just going to work with what you have on your page. And these are just two other exercises. And there are many more. When I teach this to my students, I call them filters. It's really just different if you were looking at this and you were adding, looking at it with different shades of glasses, or you were doing something different. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 1 minute. All right. I want you to work with what you have, what you selected on your page. And what you're going to do is you're going to massage the grammar. So now we're going out of pure found poetry, and now we're starting to play around a little bit. All right. So here's what you can do. And I'm only going to give you, I'll give you 1.5 minutes to do this because I don't want you to think too hard. I want you to read through your piece. If you need to put things in a different order, if you need to shift word endings in English, or if you need to rearrange some of the Tongan, depending on what you want to do, you can play around too. You can cut things in half if you want to, whatever it is. I want you to start now manipulating the grammar, manipulating the words, putting them in different directions, maybe taking half a line and putting it, Frankenstein it, do whatever you want to do, and see what else comes up. All right. So yeah, let's just do, I keep on changing the time. I do want to be mindful of people's time. I do just want to do 1.5 minutes and see, just read through it, say it out loud to yourself, rearrange things, make things stranger, make them smoother, whatever it is. Take 1.5 minutes to massage the grammar. Okay. So manipulate what you have, and then we'll come back in about 1.5 minutes. Okay. Okay. Ready, go. All right, that was 1.5 minutes. It's okay if you're still working on, if you're just like, oh, I'm in the middle of idea, keep working on that idea. But I do want to open it up for someone to maybe share this new piece that came out. Whether you've changed one thing or you've changed the whole thing, I just want to hear another example. Any volunteers? Want to share what you've gotten now?
I can share mine.
That would be awesome. Thank you. Malo.
Dominant country, land of weeping, Fonga Fonga Eki, a turtle, Alanga Ika.
Oh, I love it. I love that. Malo, do you mind reading that one more time for us? One more time.
Yeah, sure. Dominant country, land of weeping, fonga fonga eki, a turtle, alanga ika.
I love how sparse it is. And again, kind of thinking about the connections that come from it. Does anybody want to respond to that poem and talk about what you heard in that piece? Anything that you noticed?
Yeah, Malo Mani, thank you so much for the poem. The connection between the flora, the fauna, the centrality of animals in our origin stories. When thinking of the turtle, you know, Malila, and or thinking about, you know, the rat in one of the Kava stories, and just the connection, you know, how it all starts and begins. Like that's the genesis. Like that's where we start, is, you know, with the land, with the animals. So, and I like how you said it was sparse, you know, but that's like you know, you're economic with your words, money, you know, like it's just like everything is where it should be. So it's very, very mafana. I appreciate it.
That was awesome. Beautifully done. The last thing that we'll do, and this is my, oh, I got some love in the chat too, money. Last thing, and this is something that you can choose to do now, or you're just like, no, I like the way that I have it. This is the last thing that you can do as like another filter. Here is where you add your own voice, right? Technically, you're adding your voice a little bit when you were rearranging the order of the found text and massaging the grammar. Now you can actually vocalize your own self, your own perspective by adding in your own words, linking the different lines that you've created. So reading through, this is a really good exercise to do, reading something aloud, kind of trusting yourself and kind of thinking, oh, what is my body, or like, what is my mind telling me to say after this word or after this line? Maybe there's nothing. It's like, nope, that's a good line by itself. Maybe there's a connection you want to write into this next line. So what I'm going to have you do, and this is just going to be just our last minute and a half. I want you to read through your poem. You can keep editing, massaging the grammar, but I want you to try and add in your own words in between, whatever you need to do to connect. Maybe there's a connection that needs to be made a little bit more clearly through your own words, linking images, linking phrases. So we'll take one more minute and a half, and then we'll be done with our exercises. So I'll put a minute and a half on the clock, and then we'll come back. Ready, go. All right, so that was the minute and a half. Imagine what you could do with, 10 minutes. But I just wanted to open up for anybody else who wants to either share any part of this piece that you've created. You could do your pure found poem. You could do the massaged grammar version, or you could do the one that went through all three parts. Just want to open it up for folks to share what came up for them.
Okay, I will go, but I am so nervous because I don't even know. I don't even know what I wrote. Okay. One, the one and only type of Fijian face. Fonga fonga faka, mara faka, fisi, too dark, fonua loto, a stone enclosed, okutao fonua. I don't know.
With it. Come with it.
I don't know if it makes sense.
And you know what's great is that there are connections you can make for it. And in this kind of work, in poetry, 90% of the magic is not making sense until you finally get that combination that you want. It's like, this is what I needed. But this is just magic tricks right now. You're playing around with the words, and it was awesome. I loved it. At least you put in the chat, like, felt like you were talking about anti-Blackness and spirits. Yes, really kind of drawing that out. And you can hear the rhythm in it, the way that you're flowing between your words, matching, you know, one, the one. And like, I love that. I love that kind of playing around. That's some Hananike Trust style stuff. So that was amazing. Anybody else want to share any version of your found work? It's going to be amazing. Maybe one more person?
I can share quickly. Okay. To emerge, to come into view, unearthing Fonua Mahu, unearthing Fonua Tangi, unearthing Fonua Whaingata'a. What is a country, a nation without the land and the people?
Yes. Oh, I love all of that. The opening lines are stunning. Thinking about things emerging like our ancestors saw. That was awesome. Thank you so much. I don't want to, you know, if there's anybody else who wants to share, I, you know, want to be mindful of people's times. So we're coming up on 9:30, West Coast of the US. I also just want to shout out, I see Elizabeth Kite in the chat. Hey girl, I haven't seen you in a minute, so I don't even know what time it is over there. Hello, oh, so good to see you. But I just wanted to ask if anybody has questions, or anybody wants to share their poem. It's kind of, that was my show. This is my magic trick. So thank you so much for letting me talk. And
thank you so much, Dr. Kava. Sorry, go ahead and finish. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, please take these games. They are word games. That's all poetry is at first, is playing with things. So please take these. You can play this game at any time. It's a good kids game too. Playing around with words, even physically, like getting a piece of paper and, like, you know, ripping it up and seeing what happens when you rearrange it. You can even, you know, play around with naming things as poems. Like, I love an assignment that I give my students that I learned from another teacher is to, they bring in a receipt and they have to read it like it's a poem. Like, because it has an author, right? Like, that McDonald's wrote you a love letter. It's like, girl, that was $6.99. Like, it's just kind of going through, it's just fun. It's fun, just playing around. But yeah, if there's any questions, if not, thank you so much for letting me be in this space and bringing my, you know, my bag of tricks. And it's so awesome in this space. Thank you so much, Okiti, for having me here. Malo apito.
Hello, Dr. Kava. I'll just let people unmute, you know, if you had any questions, you know, if you want to give Dr. Kava her flowers, just, you know, say some words of appreciation, you know. But yeah, just for the next 5 minutes, maybe, you know, maybe 5-10 minutes, however long. And then after that, we'll just go ahead and close our space. This is such an amazing generative talk tonight. I'm going to need to go back and watch the recording like 10 times. Yes, and also please, if you have the funds, if you have the capacity to, Dr. Kava's Venmo is in the chat. So, this is all we all just support each other every way we can. We're just passing around the same $20, so it's all good. But yeah, I'll just leave it open for any Q&A, or if anybody just wanted to, any words for Dr. Kava.
I have a question. Dr. Kava, mahalo for coming and for sharing so much information. I wanted to ask you, what did this look like when you started like Poetry Slam in Tonga? If you're able to like share and describe what you noticed, the difference of how that conversation looked like for like when they were developing their poetry slam, what's the what do they talk about? I'm just so curious because I just feel like the people in Tonga are just so amazing, and I know I put them on this pedestal. For me, they are, but I'm just curious, was it the youth that you were teaching, and what was like their poetry about? Was like, what kind of emotion was it? Was it anger? Was it beautiful? Was it romantic? Like what were they slamming about?
That's such a great question. And I also just want to be fully transparent, is that a lot of the youth that I'm working with are, when they were composing, I'm also working with my partner in crime, Daniela Petelo. Liz knows a lot of, I work with the organization Seleka, that we host all of our workshops at their studio in Havaruloto. So I will say that Nella was the one that was also kind of encouraging them to speak more. And we actually had to do a lot of things, just like, you don't have to use the English if you don't want to. Like, you don't have to. Just because I'm speaking English and I can understand the basics of what you're saying, like, doesn't mean that you have to. And like, once they were like, there's no rules, but there's guidelines, like, that's a difference. It's different, like having rules versus guidelines. Guidelines is just like what I just gave to you. Just like, look, you already have this already here. All you got to do is just filter it through different things. And what they would do, and this is one of the, I'd run the Pacific Verse a couple of years in a row, and like kind of had, starting in 2014, 2015, 2016, couldn't go in 2017, 2018, went back for a year in 2019. And because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to go back. But what we developed were these workshops that allowed our students, and it's anybody, and when we mean by student, we mean everybody. Like, we would have our elders come and sit in, like we had like the little ones, the like little 7, 8, 9-year-olds. So we had to figure out how to entertain them and then also teach the other ones too. But what they would do, I distinctly remember this. It was maybe the first time that we ran a Pacific Verse showcase. And we didn't run it as a traditional slam in terms of it was a competition. We didn't really do it that way. And slams are kind of set up in such a way that didn't really fit into what we were trying to do because of the competition. Like, we didn't want them to be ranking themselves above, like, this is literally against the pedagogy that we're trying to give. But I will never forget, we were at Uliti Wata building, and and we right up in Tongatapu, it's like in the Nukolofa, be specifically, Uliti Wata building, several stories, and like right across the street is Digi Square. It's this big square. And we were on the second floor at the time. That's when Josh Savietti and Lineti Latu were running Icon Tonga, which was another youth faith-based program for dance, actually. Liz knows all these people and has been there and seen it all the organizers running through there. I had never seen this before, working in the States, where we ran a really structured workshop, giving them prompts in Tongan. I work with Nella to translate the prompts into Tongan. And what we did is, I'd never seen this before. And our workshops were usually about 2 hours each. I watched these young people ranging from about 13 all the way up to 18. There's probably about like 10, 12 12 of them there. They composed a piece. They then edited it. We worked with them on editing. And then they went outside onto the balcony and just started memorizing it. And by the time we were ready to go, they had fully memorized, they had fully composed, edited, and memorized, and were performing at performance level, like with phrasing and everything, just riffing. Like they have these pieces that they've constructed that have structure, that they've edited, that they've made decisions about, and they're funny, but they're also really, they bite. Like, they're talking about, you know, some of the students are talking about their relationship to the church, the relationship to their elders, you know, really applying this kind of blunt honesty, but also openness to these really controversial things that they may not, you know, I'm even scared to talk about it in front of people. Like I'm uncomfortable doing that. And here they are, like, right, you know, just one right after the other, and they feed off of each other's energy. So they're like, oh, he did that perfectly, I'm gonna do mine even better. Like, and they're laughing, and they really, like, the energy just goes up and up and up because they see each other's excellence and they just want to get more excellent. And it's not in a competition in terms of like, I'm going to put you down. It's like, ooh, that was amazing, let me do this. And they're also genre bending, of course. So they'll bring in, because we also do music workshops too. So they'll write songs and they'll take it in directions I had no idea that they were going to do. So they talk about things that there's always the baseline humor. There's always some sort of humor. They're always looking for that little bit of a laugh, but there's also, they're never far away from like saying like what really is like, this is a joke about something that's really not that funny. Yeah, relationships to school, relationships to each other. I remember the last time I was there, I had one of my students really talking about her, you know, she's one of the older kids. And she's just talking about her thoughts about the future. What am I going to do? She also wrote a science fiction poem just off the cuff, just like my grandma, like we were just playing around with metaphor, and she turned this really wacky line in English into this really amazing poem. The original line in English was like, my grandmother is a UFO. And I was like, where's this going? And she goes on to like honor her grandmother in this like intergalactic way. And it's in Tongan. It was amazing. And she loved it too, because she first was really uncomfortable with like, I don't know how I like feeling it. It was like, there's no stakes attached to saying this. You're just playing right now. It's so important that you play. And then when she figured that out, when she felt comfortable, I'll never forget Buddha, or Tevita Latu, who's the founder of Seleka, his mother, Gisia, lives at the house. And it was one of the most amazing moments to see this elder who I look to in terms of like Tongan protocol. She's sitting there with Mele and just kind of listening to her poems and listening to all these things that we're doing. And she's giving her advice like, yeah, that's beautiful. These weird lines, like translating my grandmother's a UFO into Tongan. And then you have an elder actually helping her edit. It was amazing. So there's a very long way of saying they tell the truth, but they're also very funny about it, which allows them to kind of give them some space to talk about these issues that they're dealing with wherever they're coming from. So, yeah.
Oh, Lee, can you talk a little bit about, oh, sorry, Lily, go ahead, Lily. Lily had her hand up.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted, Lee, if you could just briefly talk about Seleka and your experience with them and just the what they're all about and yeah.
I can't really
you can sum it up into like 30 seconds.
I can't really, I don't want to speak for all of Seleka. All I'm, being part of Seleka and however I can be part of Seleka has always been, it's like, to be honest, it's finding the other Tongan weirdos.
Yes.
Like,
I love that.
and kind of, and also it's finding a space, a structure, and a safe place that they create for people to play around, to like, you know, they make dirty jokes and they like, you know, have all of these things going on, but they make a safe space for, I feel safe in their space. I also see who else they make space for, which, you know, I've seen their work with, you know, the ladies that they go and support, that they do the backup music for at Miss Galaxy, the partnerships they have with other folks, other, you know, they always go and support, and they're always going around the islands and running their workshops, which are so amazing to watch them work with the youth. Just to see the safe space made by these guys who are, you know, wearing metal t-shirts and
listening to Devolo music.
Yeah, literally. It's just, they make this really amazing creative space. That's what I feel like Sedaka has been, and I think they've been active since, I think 2009. I think is the date. Something like that. So
amazing.
Yeah. Lily, did you have a question?
No, I was about to dip out, but I wanted to share my poem and whatever words I put together.
Yes, please.
So the basis of this poem is based on the bones that were dug up when we built our house in Tonga. It's a part of a graveyard because it's a lot of tribal warfare going on. So this is dedicated to the bones we dug up, and we're just like, what the hell? Okay, so the poem's called Manatu Tai Iloa. Manatu is to remember. Tai Iloa is you can't remember. Who are you? What's your name? What's your story? Keke Manatu Ikoa. Were you Iloa? Maybe Kaikoa. You lived your life, left your mark, and I so wish to know. Huh, I know, Sophia Ilo, tu mau mau. But I really do. Take talafakaku. That's it.
Oh my goodness, yes. Thank you so much, Lily.
Lily, sorry, before you go, Lily, David Latu talked about a similar story of his where he grew up in Haveluloto, where they were digging up the land, and they also found bones from the civil wars. So I don't know if you guys are from the same, you know, same area, but he talks about that. And so I was like, when you said that, I was just like, whoa, like, but beautiful poem, beautiful, amazing, amazing. I hope you publish it. That's, man, beautiful.
I love that the playfulness and the humor going into that too. Who are you? What's your name? Also being Filipino as well. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I loved your delivery. There's, you know, there's so many different kinds of nuances that you bring into those words. Please, please. There's actually a call out for Tongan women's poetry coming up. I'll share that with organizers from OKT so that you can think about publishing the work that you started in this workshop. So I'll send that. But thank you, everybody.
I have to interrupt you guys because it sounds like people are needing to leave, but can we take a picture real fast? I've been given the prompt in the chat to remind us.
Thank you, Pauline.
People can continue to follow Noah. I'm just wondering before everybody leaves. Sorry, Kataki. I'm so sorry for interrupting.
Good.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, let's take on before Blame Losa and Lily leave.
I can see everybody.
Okay, so I'll try to take it. If you want to turn
Hi,
on.
Lucky.
Say hi.
No, it's not right.
Hi, Nick. Also, get to see everybody's faces.
3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, got it.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
amazing.
Back to you, Lisiate. Sorry, everyone.
Oh no, I just, just in light of time, I don't want to take up too much of Dr. Kava's time, and I don't want to keep you guys. So, yeah, if there was any last comments or anything she wanted to say, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up from here and just close this space.
I just want to.
Oh, sorry, sis. I think you're
Oh,
muted.
you're on mute, Lilica.
I just wanted to give you flowers. Lead Malo Alpito, thank you so much for taking time to be and spend time with us and teach us your cool tricks. I'm definitely gonna keep practicing and trying these methods. And just want to say Ofalahiatu. Ofatu.
Ofatu. Ofatu, baby. I want to write some poetry too.
Future poet right there, baby Lake. Oh yeah, so I guess I'll just go ahead and just close it. Just want to thank you again, Dr. Kava. Like Elizabeth says in the chat, just there's no words, but thank you. So thank you so much, Dr. Kava.
No worries.
Lisiate Kataki, sorry. This is a Tongan space, so we just keep going, and the hand was Rose. Believe me,
Oh, yes.
their hand on. Sorry.
Sorry, no. Before I leave, I just wanted to read my poem, please.
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Fonua Mahu, the land, the sea, the people. Fonua Hao, land of free, happy, and friendly. Fonua, grave, where families weep, it's done. Now it's time to rest. Koya be malo.
Malo.
Yes, Malo.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
The best way to end it. All right.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so
Malo.
much.